Welcome, honored guests. If you're listening, you have landed on a Toastmaster-inspired podcast. I'm your host, Bernie Martin, and I hope to have some interesting conversations with some interesting people. Join us as we deep dive into some of the topics that people are passionate about. I'm so glad you chose to visit with us on Passionate Pursuits. Welcome again to Passionate Pursuits. This evening's guest I have with me is a longtime friend. We've known each other since 1984. We met in Orlando, Florida, when I was a wee pup working at Rack's Roast Beef on West Colonial Drive. Ed and his brother Mike were co-youth pastors at New Life Nazarene, and they used to come in to eat after their youth meetings. We just became friends through that avenue, and it was a wild and crazy ride. So tonight, I would like to introduce you to Edwin Locket Jr. Hello, Ed.
Hello there.
Welcome to the podcast. I mentioned that we met at Rack's. You tell a story about the impression that you had when you first met me.
Well, we used to have our youth meetings on Tuesday nights, and we were definitely creatures of habit. We would go eat at the same restaurant, and we were mostly going just to hang out and have more time to visit. So it was more about that than eating, but we did like the food too. And we went in there often enough till we got to recognize some of the help. But you're the one definitely that stood out, and you waited on us several times. And you just seemed like you were something a little different. You seemed kind of serious. You know, you knew how to be friendly and polite and everything, but there was also a part of you that seemed a little more private, more hidden. So anyway, I just thought there was more to you. I felt like it's going to take more than just a couple of roast beef sandwiches to figure out who you were, and didn't even know really if you even wanted to be figured out.
Yeah.
We took our chances and took a few shots. We thought, hey, let's try to get her to come to church. We wanted to try to get you to come to a youth service. I thought if you were a serious person that maybe you would like it, because we were actually a little bit more serious than a lot of what I see in the world today. A lot of us are still friends to this day.
Yes, we are.
Back in 1984.
Yeah.
So we kept talking to you and started getting to know you and developing a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I think guarded is probably the word that you were looking for, because my experience with the church was not a good one. Given that I was navigating some pretty hefty dysfunction at home, the church only seemed to cover over what I was facing and what I was dealing with, and nobody was ever really available to help. When you all were inviting me to go, of course, the smile was there and the nod was there, but in my head I'm thinking, been there, done that, didn't work for me, no thank you. And I would sit out in the lobby smoking my cigarette and just watch you guys come and go. But I will say that one of the things that started to get my attention was the fact that you went above and beyond to reach out to me. Many times when I share my testimony, I tell them about the tray liner. You remember the tray liner?
I do.
So
I don't remember everything I wrote, but I know I saw it.
Yeah.
Last I knew, you still had it.
I do still have it.
And,
So for the listeners, the restaurants, fast food restaurants, they used to have the plastic service trays, and then on the tray they would have what was called a tray liner, just a piece of paper. Sometimes it would have the restaurant logo or the special they were running or whatever. So Ed had taken one of those tray liners and flipped it over and just started writing. He wrote all of this stuff to me. He wrote a little poem to me. He wrote some things about how much God loved me. And when he gave it to me, the thing that impacted me the most wasn't so much what he wrote back then. Of course, now I read over it and it's very impactful for me. But it was the fact that you took the time to sit there and actually write something to me. And that made me feel special.
Yeah, the biggest for me through the years, even back then, even more so as I've become an old man now. Communication is a lot more to me about attitude. I don't even know the best word to use sometimes. There's things when people communicate that are nonverbal. And I mean, just a vibe, maybe for lack of a better word, or sense that you pick up from somebody. Sometimes you can be talking to somebody, and we feel that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes you meet somebody and you just click with them right away. You don't know why. It's like you never met that person before. I've met people that I really clicked with. I always felt like a big part of communication is the heart, the feeling that goes behind whatever it is. It's always been about the motive of the person, their communication with you, what's motivating it and what's driving it. Why is this person talking to me, or what are they trying to say, or what's the purpose here? Do we just talk to everybody the same way? Do I take a tray liner every restaurant we go to and write stuff on it for people? No. I don't remember for sure. I might have done one or two others. I've done little things here and there along the way like that. And ironically, people keep some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure lots of it doesn't get kept. But at any rate, I definitely didn't write it thinking you were going to still have it all these years later.
Yeah, I did.
I wished I'd have known that. I could have wrote something really prophetic in there,
Right. And then the other thing that I still have was a note that Janice, she was one of the youth group. Janice had written me a note also and invited me to come and spend the weekend with her at her house, her parents' house. But her parents were on the mission field, and so they had a spare room. And she invited me to come and spend the weekend there just to kind of get away from some of the things that I was facing at my own house. And the line at the end said, wouldn't it be better to spend some time in the sanctuary? And at the time, that was a big topic that you all were discussing was about having that place, that sanctuary. And that was an intriguing thought for me, to actually have a place where I could go and be safe and feel safe. And that was, in all of my 18 years, that was actually a new concept for me. And it touched something in my heart. And then after a while, I accepted that invitation to go to a youth service and never stopped. And it changed me. And then the youth group ended up morphing into a ministry team, which was called Wilderness Cry, after the verse in Isaiah about John the Baptist preparing a way in the wilderness.
Actually, it was sort of after that.
Okay.
It was kind of after that. Some of us that kind of started doing outreach as a band and a kind of a mixture ministry. We did skits because that was really what we first went out as, is doing skits. But we needed something to fill in between our skits. So we had a lot of musical talent in our group. So we just have people fill in. And we kept taking names for stuff. And then we find out the names were taken. Like we used the name First Love, and that was taken. Found a band that was called First Love, had an album out. Okay, well, let's go with Breakthrough. Well, we went Breakthrough, then we learned later they had an album. We thought, well, what name? We ended up, actually went a couple of places and just were introduced without a name. And I thought, we got to come up with something. And I had, way back in earlier days, written a little newsletter called The Wilderness Cry, which is taken, as you mentioned, from John the Baptist as a voice crying in the wilderness. But it was meant to be like a town crier, like it was a little paper. And I thought, well, that's pretty different sounding, Wilderness Cry. Nobody's going to have that. Let's use that until we come up with something better. So we just started using Wilderness Cry, which people had trouble with all through the years. They didn't know Wilderness Call the Wilderness, Wilderness Criers, Midnight Criers.
Was it Wilderness anyway, Cry too?
Yeah, that was one of them. But we knew who we were.
Yeah, we knew who we were.
And it was a pretty good indication. Of course, we weren't ever trying to be famous or do anything like that. We just wanted to try to help. I didn't really grow up in church or grow up particularly religious, but I guess I did grow up somehow hungry. It didn't take me long in life. At 15 years old, I'd already kind of figured out there's got to be way more to life than what I'm seeing. And I knew some church people, and I knew kind of what the philosophy of the world was at the time through my music and through the minds of our day. And none of it was really touching that part of me way down inside until I really met the Lord in a real way, for real. That's what the ultimate idea was. And instead of just saying a prayer and now it's in, you just try to be good till you die, you actually enter into this discipleship. You enter into a life of learning and growing and new experiences and new plateaus. And of course, there's ups and downs. And most people are going to deal with tragedies. That was part of our idea with that name, was to be a cry in the wilderness and go to places that were like the wilderness. because
Mhm.
we ended up, of course, ministering in a lot of unconventional places. We did minister some in churches, but we actually ended up mostly focusing on soup kitchens, jails, prison ministry, nursing homes, stuff like that. A whole lot more. Going to places that were not always particularly welcoming towards religion, for lack of a better term. But then when we got past that with people, I don't like to say I'm not religious because it means different things to different people. But the real idea here is there a relationship, and are you growing, and is there love and compassion, humility? And that's something I think pretty much everybody, definitely including me, needs more of. So anyway, that was kind of what our idea was. And we were saying, prepare the way of the Lord for him to come into your life, to intersect into this scene, into this world, the street people, like the nursing home people, several that we met that we got to know that were pretty much just left there to die, who didn't have many relatives to come see them. Some had relatives, a lot didn't. There's a lot of hard life to deal with there, and people who had Alzheimer's and family members that would come see them and they didn't recognize them. And then you got the jail and the soup kitchen feeding the street people and seeing those people, kind of a lot of them going around in a cycle of getting out of prison. Then you see them in the soup kitchen. Then you see them a little bit, a couple of weeks, they're back in the jail again. And for a lot of people, it's hard to break the cycles that they're in or to get out of those cycles. And we had to have something real, something much deeper and much more serious, and something you really got to go all in for if it's going to do anything for you.
Yeah.
So Jesus pretty much always said that. It's not a legalistic thing. It's just a matter of, you want God to be serious with you, be serious with him. You want him to be real to you, be real to him.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, we're proud of you. You stuck around. You finally came to a service. I was a little bummed. I don't know that you remembered this, but the particular night you finally broke down and came, it was a stormy night, and we had a lot less kids than we normally did. That wouldn't have been the service that I would have picked to show off as the first service,
Right. But as a lesson, I didn't have anything to compare it to, and it was my first time. What I heard and what I remember that night was enough to keep me coming back, because I heard people giving testimonies that sounded like they really knew God. I heard songs that I had never heard before. And just the fact that you guys reached out to me like you did, that was enough to change the trajectory that I was on. So, whether it was 20 or 40 at that point, it was destined for me to be there that night. And God knew what he was doing, no matter how many people were there, right?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing how that works.
Yeah.
Wasn't the one I picked, but I guess when somebody's hungry, in all honesty, I think when a person is hungry enough, the Lord doesn't depend on a large or small group, to move there. And if somebody's really tuned into that, which you were, then as long as he shows up, that was enough.
Absolutely.
And of course, so you grew along with us. We eventually kind of grew off in different directions. Most of that group, I think, is still serving the Lord to varying degrees. A lot of us had a lot of first-time experiences, first mission trip to Haiti, definitely the whole idea of ministering in soup kitchens and getting to know street people. And I don't mean going on Thanksgiving. I mean every Friday night for about 4 years. And every Thursday night to the jail, which Orlando, that was a big jail. And there were some amazing things that we saw there, and amazing things at the soup kitchen, and amazing things at the nursing homes, and then all kind of various other places. There was a whole lot of stuff that we all experienced together.
Yeah. And I know I can speak for myself, and I would be willing to bet I could speak for most of us that were a part of Wilderness Cry at some point, is that those early days are what formed my faith for me, because that was the real deal. I know that if I would have just gone to a traditional church, I probably would not have survived. The fact that we were involved in ministry like we were, and we saw what we saw, and we talked to the people that we talked to, it just brought a whole different level of Christianity into focus. And I know we've mentioned this before, but there was a poem that I had written, and it made reference to being in Central Florida, being in Orlando. You were surrounded by Disney World and Sea World, and there was Circus World. But what we were doing was all about the real world. You know, we were dealing with people who had spent their Friday night paycheck on a bottle and came into the coffee house drunk. We were dealing with the people at the nursing home, like you've already mentioned, some that were just left there by family. We were dealing with, so many different people, so many different scenarios, but God was right there in the middle of all of it. And to see him working in these different pockets, it was transformational. I had never seen anything like that and haven't really seen much like it since. So for myself, and like I said, probably for many of us, I would say thank you, not only to you and to Mike, but just that God allowed us to be a part of that, because it really was a unique time and a unique group.
Yeah, I don't see too many because we did a lot of stuff together,
Hmm.
and without ever being a cult, we put money together. We didn't make people get their money. We put money together to buy a van and get sound equipment,
Hmm.
and several of us ended up rooming together, various places, sharing rent together, stuff like that. So we were kind of like
It was
a
a community.
big, yeah. And, it wasn't all perfect by any stretch, but it was pretty unique in a lot, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And of course, I hear people sometimes they say, well, I don't have any regrets. And I'm thinking, oh, man, you just haven't learned anything yet.
Yeah.
Uh, I have things I wish I could do over or say different or do different. But as far as becoming a Christian or this search for God, because I consider myself still to be a seeker. I don't feel like I've solved everything.
Hmm.
I don't feel like, I know all there is to know by any stretch. I think God's a lot bigger than that, a whole lot bigger than that. And trying to be open to learn. And as long as I stay that way, I do keep learning. I've been amazed how many things I didn't know back then. Of course, it's sad because the older you get, the less you know. And then there's that paradox about, of course, the more you know, the less you know. And it's not a stress thing. It's not like it's just something I want to know. It's what I'm thirsty for. That's what I care the most about. I'm more concerned about those things. God, his plan for humans, how he sees the world, how he moves, to see him move. I'm more interested in things that I believe will last eternally as opposed to all of these things that are going to come and go. I look at so many of the things from back then, so many of my friends that didn't matter who they were, popular, cheerleader, homecoming queen, quarterback, whatever. And a lot of them have passed away. All of them got old. The ones that are still alive, none of us look like rock stars anymore. It's like, hey, age happens to everybody.
Yeah.
And even as a kid, I mean, the bands that I used to listen to, all the bands, there's hardly any of the bands that were my favorite rock bands back in the day, hardly any of them that still have all their members still living, and some of them are even down to just one. So things are temporary. Yeah, you can still hear their music and on the radio, or they live on in our memories, but you're not going to be getting any new albums from them anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like things are temporary. What was popular, the clothes we thought were popular. I remember wearing cuffed plaid bell bottoms and those really high heeled disco shoes, platform shoes. I mean, I wore some crazy stuff and I thought I was so cool back then. I look back now and it's just embarrassing. And the clothes that we thought were cool, the fashions, the things that were such a big deal back then, those are laughable things there. But I mean, there are other things that we really pour ourselves into that don't end up amounting to much. So the friendships, the relationships we have with people, I believe anything we learn and gather spiritually that can make us better people and something God can use to put some good in this world, because a lot of the world, of course, as I've gone on, big part of what my life has been mission work in Haiti for almost 30 years now, and in Honduras as well on the side since 2004. And the things I've seen, the experiences I've had in these other countries and the world, it's a huge place. And there's a lot of dark places. And I look at this country and how much we have, and still people are so miserable and unhappy to a large degree, because there's so much we just take for granted, like drinking water and not being in a war zone and having food to eat every day. for at least most days. But most people that I know, I always had food every day. As long if I wanted it, it was always there. So, and even in Haiti, for however much I suffered, there was some rough times there where I didn't always have a way out, but I always did have a passport that brought me back here. As long as we were able to get here, we had some times there that got pretty nasty, and passport wouldn't have amounted to nothing. But the world's just huge and big, and I feel like sometimes we get really caught up in the mundane and spend our whole lives in the things that are mundane, and we don't start getting smart till it's too late, or till you care about people when you lose them. You got a mother you don't ever talk to, or a father, or some broken relationships, or you got somebody you should be talking to or spending some time with. All these things you're going to get around to doing it eventually, and then just someday that opportunity, that door is closed forever, and you'll never get to make that right. Mm-hmm. So I try to think about those kind of things. Sounds depressing, but it's not. It can be a little bit at times, but I do want to be sober, and sometimes I don't learn the most when I'm happy. I usually learn the most when I'm going through something.
So you've talked about some of your life lessons, your learning experiences. If you were to try to give advice to someone who is a seeker, what would you say to them? Or even if you think of it in the concept of older you talking to younger you, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, it's hard because it would depend on the day and the time. Even talking to other people depends on the person. I've learned through the years that a lot of times when I thought I was right, God wrong, turned out he was right. I have to just come to accept that there's a whole lot of things I don't understand. This is a huge universe, and my world pretty much revolves around me, and I can't totally help that because I am literally in the center of my universe. Mm-hmm. This is where my point of reference is. This is where my headquarters is in me, and everything I look at goes out from where I'm at. So we all tend to be in the center of our universes, and we all see things differently. I think the problem, sometimes we got to realize that doesn't take in the whole picture. There's always bigger pictures going on. There's things going on that are just beyond our understanding. That's true. A lot of what I believe, and this isn't a cop-out, but there's actually a lot of things that I believe that I would believe whether I was a Christian or not. And that's actually part of what made me become a Christian. Because you can say, well, I can't deal with all the problems. Well, you're going to have problems. Oh, I can't deal with the way the world is. Well, the world's still the way it is anyway. There's a lot of things. It doesn't matter what you believe, whether you accept it or believe it. That's the way it is. So for me, we're here for a while. It's temporary. I'd like to know, if possible, why I'm here. Is there anything I need to be doing while I'm here? I believe I was created for something. I believe that, because humans are so complex. Puppies are cute. Kittens are cute. Sometimes they're nicer than people. A lot of times. Humans are just very, very complex, and they are the best and the worst. I think what the planet has here, I don't know. I just think it's a huge place, and we're just little specks on a speck in a little speck of a galaxy or universe amongst our infinite number, and numbers that there is no numbers. There aren't numbers for them because they can't be counted. So time, when did time begin? When does time end? Where does space end? How far can you go before you hit a wall? Let's say you go a bazillion, quadrillion miles and you hit a wall. What's on the other side of the wall? Time and space, which don't really seem related, yet somehow can't be separated. So all of these things, and you did mention quantum physics a while ago. I see an imprint of a divine intelligence all over the place. People that stand on this planet, well, I'd like to see some evidence God exists. Start slow if you have to. You don't start with whether you believe the Bible, whether you believe everything. Just start off with the fact, at least, to say, I don't know everything. That's a good place to start right there. I don't know everything. And also that for me, before I even knew who God was or much about him, first thing just was that this wasn't an accident. So I went on from there for details. And then as far as the Bible, because the deeper or the more I learn, and more I learn about Scripture, and I like to study New Testament history in the times of New Testament times, I should say, get a more correct context for a lot of the Scriptures we read, a lot of things Jesus said. It makes a lot more sense. A lot of times, a better context, the better understanding you can get. A lot of those things make sense. It's not about just trying to be smarter. It's trying to learn more, trying to be in tune, with what we were made to be. And in my case, of course, I definitely believe we're talking about God. We're talking about Jesus. We're talking about His Holy Spirit in us. But these things are a lot deeper. Those words have been abused so much, and in some cases, they almost lose their meaning. I want to know God in a real way, in a much deeper sense than just being my made up, invisible buddy up in the sky, And that one thing too is this: if you feel like God thinks the same way you do about everything, then you're probably off base. Because God, as a general rule, doesn't seem to. There's some things we're kind of in tune on, but there's other things I just don't have a clue why this happened or why this is going on. But I can't see bigger pictures. This is a story I've told over and over and over. It was just a little lesson. Even that, this is another thing too. I think the world is full of lessons. If you open your eyes, you have to be blindfolded and cover your ears to not learn anything, even from the world, from nature around us. I remember one day I was riding down the road and there was a bird in the road. It was a little back road, paved, so I was rolling up slow and quiet, but I saw a bird there, and the bird was looking at some kind of butterfly or something on the ground. He was kind of going that direction, like he wanted to get that bug. He wanted to eat that bug. But when the car started rolling up, it was almost like, and I don't think he really thought this, but it was like he was mad at me because I'm messing him up, because he's that close to getting the bug. But if he don't get out of the way, the car might run over him. So he had to give up the bug, and he flew away without getting his bug. I think he was mad at me because I made him lose his dinner. But then when I got up closer, one thing I saw that the bird didn't see, there was a cat over at the side of the road that was watching that bird. And so as far as that bird knows, I just made him lose his dinner. But in the bigger picture, I saved his life. You would have got that bug, and you would have had your dinner, and then that cat would have got you, and you would have been his dinner, and it would have been over. And so there's just all these things, variables we talked about earlier. There's all these things in the world that we don't know. There's a bazillion, quadrillion, quantum physics type moving pieces and parts, and a million things go into every breath we breathe, the experiences, the air, every happy joy that you feel, the sadness you feel, you meet somebody, you have a good day, a bad day, a good meal, the weather's involved, the temperature's involved, how your body feels involved. There's a bazillion things involved in every moment we live and every step that we take, and it's just a bazillion little things that all fall into place that make every little moment possible. And I think it's way beyond human comprehension, but it's important stuff. Even if we can't fully understand it, it's good to know about it and realize that some things happen and they might seem bad. And then to us, they are bad, maybe, but maybe somehow, some way that we don't understand, maybe, somehow on a way bigger picture. I don't know. Maybe it won't look the same. I'll put it that way. I don't know. I don't want like to sound insensitive. I've had plenty of sorrow and tragedy in my life. I've lost lots of people I've loved. I know people lose a spouse. There was something in the news, I think just 2 days ago. Woman and couple just got married, and they're on the way back to the hotel from the marriage, and she's still wearing her wedding dress, and some drunk driver runs into them, and the bride gets killed, still wearing the wedding dress. I don't have answers for that. I don't think there's any way around getting hurt. I know that we live in a world that's tied together with other people that have free wills, and sometimes their free wills impose on our free wills, but I don't know what I could tell. I don't know what you could tell somebody in a case like that. What are you going to tell that husband? But the world's full of that kind of stuff. It's all around us all the time, but we block it out because it's too depressing. But this is a fallen world in general. I just would say this. I've learned this. Just because you know that God still has everything under control doesn't mean it doesn't hurt right here and right now. It's not a shortcut. You're going to hurt. I mean, my mom died back in 2020. So it's been almost 3 years, and it still can hurt when I think about it. I believe I'll see her again someday in a much better place. And it's not like my And I won't get off on a big roll on that either, but it's not like a make-believe heaven up in the sky kind of a thing. It's a lot deeper and more meaningful than that. But at any rate, I believe better days are ahead, but that doesn't mean right now it doesn't hurt, because it does. But I do believe down the road, however long it takes, all of this pain will be gone. And no matter what you go through here and now in this life, whatever pain, no matter how deep, how hard, how unjust, how unfair, whatever you go through now, it's going to be erased and wiped out down the road. It might take a couple 100 years, I don't know. But I do have that confidence and faith. And that's a big part of faith, is patience and trusting God that he's going to make things make more sense later down the road. So, and I don't claim for a second to have answers for everything. I've learned some answers for some things. There's a lot of things you just can't, a human brain just can't wrap around it or fathom it. So that's a part where it does take faith. Part of where, and so how you have faith, I can't not believe that there's a causeless cause. I can't not believe this planet and this solar system and all that I see. That I can put on my most scientific brain, and I'm still not going to believe that all this just happened randomly. There's nothing scientific about it just happened randomly. If you took a little pocket watch and took it apart into a bunch of little pieces and threw it up in the air and let it hit the ground, how many times would you have to throw it up in the air and let it hit the ground before it would all fall back in place and make a little watch? That'll never happen. And yet we're talking about a whole universe here being tweaked to very specific measures and temperatures, distances, and it's just, I just can't, I don't have enough faith to not believe there's a creator. So from there, I began to seek, well, who is this creator? And the closest thing I've found so far that answers questions without leaving a bunch of parts left over is what I found in Jesus. So,
well, I started saying several years ago that there's always this underlying pressure that somehow I've got to defend my faith, explain to people why I'm a Christian. But I realized that, once you get to the point where you can explain faith to satisfy the critics, then it ceases to be faith, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of critics all have different ideas too. You can satisfy one critic, you'll still have 1,000 more. You'll never make all of them happy anyway. And some people don't really want to believe. It's for a lot of people, it's not that important. Even the famous verse in, I think it's in first or second Peter, it talks about being ready, sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, be ready always to give an answer to everyone that asks you with meekness and fear. And remember, it says to everyone that asks you.
Right.
So my life will hopefully shine in such a way that will draw anybody that's interested. And then anybody that asks me, I'll be glad to talk and go the extra mile and walk humbly,
Yeah.
And it's more about substance and what we are than what we know and what we say, which is hard and heavy and deep. But I'm always used to amaze me about Christianity. Well, how can these people all be Christians? They don't believe exactly the same stuff. And, that's not a big deal to me anymore. It's easier for me to divide between humble, honest, compassionate people who love mercy and who do justly than it is to just try to line everybody up that's got exact same ideas. The Bible calls for, I like this phrase, and I'm not the one that made it up, but unity, not uniformity. I think real Christians will be able to get along with each other, and if we don't agree on everything, we can keep talking about it. But I know there's people that don't agree with everything on exactly, but I believe they love the Lord, they're seeking God, they have the same feeling towards me, and that's enough to make us get along. Now, I don't count those people as enemies, and they don't count me as enemies. I've learned a lot. I've changed some ideas through the years. Not the fundamentals, the very deepest fundamentals, but there's definitely other things on the list that I've said, well, I'm not so sure about that now. But we make it all about what you believe, what you can do or can't do, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And there's so many things in the Bible, too, that we think of in the New Testament, especially where we think about things being commandments, but they're really fruit. They're not commandments. It's the fruit of the Spirit. And Galatians, where it talks about love, joy, peace, and all the fruit of the Spirit. That's not commandments to do that. That's saying if you have the Spirit, this fruit will be there. The Beatitudes and in Matthew chapter 5, where talking about blessed are the poor in spirit, all those blessed are. Those aren't commandments to be poor in spirit, to be meek, to mourn, to be hungry, thirst after righteousness. That's saying people that do those things. So this is another case of fruit. This is things that Christians would be doing, not something you have to pretend to do. You're saying, well, I gotta love that person. Yeah, part of it is you need to know to do it, but the real part of it is to really do it, not just say it. A lot of these things that we think of as commandments are really fruits. And so that's how you can tell people apart sometimes. There's been times in my life where I felt more in tune with people that believed less like me than other people, but we seemed to be more made of the same stuff. They seemed have more humility. They have more compassion. They wanted to help people. They wanted to reach out. That's another thing too. We always want everything to be able to be fixed with the right conversation or the right zinger or the right letter or the right word at the right time. But a lot of things take time. People change over time. They don't just all of a sudden, boom, hey, I see the light. Sometimes you get ideas, you get little epiphanies, or you get little eye openers here and there. But there's other things that takes a little longer. And I think of me that I am now, trying to talk to me that I was back then. And I don't know anything I could have said. Don't know anything I could have said to me back then. And I was very sincere and very fired up, but and I was right on some stuff, but I was also very wrong on some stuff too. When I think about the me that I am now, I'm trying to tell the me that I was then, hey, you need to hold off on a couple of these things here that you're ready to send people to hell for. I would have not listened to myself. So, and even now, God's the ultimate judge. I know there's things in the Bible, there's do's and don'ts for sure. There's not just like there's fruits of good things that let you know when a person does have the Spirit. There's bad things that are fruits also that let you know when a person doesn't. But forget about words. God's not going to ask us at the judgment, do you believe in me? No, he already knows. He doesn't need to ask. And then you might say yes, but he's going to say, well, your lights in your heart say no. Of course, a lot of people, I think most of us in a lot of ways, especially if you don't spend a lot of time seeking him, you're not going to know much about him because the world doesn't have a lot to say about Jesus.
Well, Ed, I do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and share some things with us.
All right. I'm glad we're still friends after all these years, and we're still going on the same road towards the same destination.
The Celestial City.
Yeah.
All right, Ed. Thanks again.
Take care, Bernie.